Hi everyone. This video is a little bit more serious in its tone, so I didn't want to interrupt it halfway through with a comedy sketch, as how I usually do my ads. It didn't really feel very appropriate, so instead I just want to take a quick minute or two of your time here at the start to thank the video's sponsor, Exter, up front. Now, most of the sponsorships that I get, I obviously don't care too much about. But with Exter, that's pretty far from the case. You know, pretty much from day one of getting my Exter wallet, it replaced my old bifold, and I haven't looked back. It fits all my cards pretty easily, and it has plenty of room for cash as well whenever I happen to be carrying any. And overall, I'd say it's held up pretty well. It looks pretty much like brand new, even with daily carry. Obviously, it's very slim design, so it fits in either my back or breast pocket very easily. I know that it might feel kind of gimmicky at first, but I really do like that quick card access button. Again, not only is it like really satisfying to do, but it's functional. It doesn't, take hardly any time at all to, pick out, I had to make sure I don't show you the details, but pick out which card that I want, and then I can just slot it back into place. I never do it backwards like that. I normally do it like there. Oh, look, there. All right, so it's nice and easy that way. So if you're interested in the Exter wallet, then you can go to the link in the description down below, use code BrandonF, and basically from now until the end of their Father's Day sale, you can get up to 35% off of your order. So thank you to Exter for sponsoring this video, and now let it begin. Every evil in the world has an explanation, the hows and whys certain things happened the way that they did. And exploring those explanations is eminently important to understanding them, and it's a significant part of historical scholarship's value to the modern world. To acknowledge things like our common humanity with individuals who carry out evil deeds, or the logic that they followed, flawed though it may be, the logic of certain immoral events or immoral institutions. All of that's a necessary part of that understanding, but it can be very easy in the pursuit of that explanation to fall into patterns of justification. And this is something that I've discussed at length in an older video, how I think that this distinction between understanding and explaining the nature of a terrible thing versus actually justifying its existence, that distinction is vital to maintain, and especially when it comes to those historic wrongdoings which continue to hold such massive influence over our lives today, both culturally and perhaps more significantly, even materially. When I made a poll asking what video should I make next, and one of the topics, which I figured would just be kind of a quick and maybe a different way of looking at a popular subject, well, it mentioned that I'd be bashing a very silly argument regarding slavery. Honestly, I was rather disappointed by some of the comments that I received in response to that poll. I mean, obviously some people are going to be angry, but some people were, let's just say, really arguing themselves into a paper bag, if that expression makes sense. I don't know. You get the idea. Some comments can be pretty horrible. The things that people said, the ignorance, how quick to anger some people became, accusing me immediately of these terrible things, making these massive assumptions not only about what my argument was going to be, which you haven't heard yet because it's going to come in this video, but about who I am as a person, my entire worldview, what I was doing, what my goal was. It was like witnessing in real time the rotting effects of this obsession over culture war nonsense that so many people seem to have. And even outside of the fact that this topic won the poll by a pretty decent margin, I would say, it convinced me that I should definitely make this video, not only to help clean out the subscriber base of C-Shesh sympathizers. Wow, say that 10 times fast. I thought it'd be a fun little turn of phrase, but it wound up being rather difficult. You get the idea, though. I don't necessarily want to be associated with that kind of revisionist or very clean look at history. I don't want to be the YouTuber who doesn't look at the serious questions and the important big issues because they're not as popular. But sadly as well, because precisely the arguments that I'm going to talk about in this video, which at first I was feeling like, most people probably understand it's kind of BS, but it might be interesting to talk about. Apparently those arguments are still, at least they're out there enough, in enough force to where I saw a few examples of it, and I didn't necessarily expect to see such clear examples of what I was going to be making fun of within my own audience. I hold no pretension that this video will be transforming any lives. If a viewer has fallen victim to the degenerative pit of neo-Confederatism, then I am sure that they have already paused this video and they're in the middle of throwing out whatever bile they can muster. I've already seen some of it. Rather, for those more academic of viewers, for whom the concept of slavery being bad doesn't make you immediately want to shoot back with contrarianism, I hope that this video might help to expand the manner in which you conceive of the institution of slavery, and perhaps more importantly, understand how to better combat certain insidious ideologies whenever they may arise, whenever you may encounter them in real life, where they actually matter, of course. And note here that real life does not include the comments section. Do not get involved in nonsense arguments with strangers on the internet who may not even be real people. I'm guilty of it, you're guilty of it, everyone is guilty. But we gotta try and avoid that kind of thing, even when it really rises up the hair on the back of the neck and all that stuff. Just enjoy the video, give a thumbs up, say something positive to me in the comments. I always enjoy that, and then go and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll go outside. Might be too hot. It's really too hot. The summer strikes hard. I don't know. Just do something positive. All right. More than enough preparation there. A lot of waffling. Oh, I can already see the comments already. Let us get started with just about the single most hilariously stupid and poorly thought out, outright, argument regarding North American slavery that I believe has ever existed, or at least it's up there. That the dignity and the treatment of enslaved persons was impacted in any significant positive fashion by virtue of their being a valuable commodity. Basically, it's the old, well, you wouldn't damage your own tools, would you, argument. As if these people have never seen someone throw a hammer to the ground after they hit their own thumb or anything like that, tool abuse. The thing I think that makes this argument so insidious is that it approaches the question from the perspective of the slaveholder, not from the slave. It isn't attempting to argue the moral philosophy or any sort of first principles behind the institution. It's more grounded than that. It's the natural response on the part of the slaver saying, well, okay, yeah, sure, maybe it's theoretically wrong, but I mean, like, let's be honest here, in real terms, it really isn't that bad, and may even be better than, and then you can have the trailing off, proceeding to list off a slew of whataboutisms about, like, the treatment on the lives of the industrial urban poor and all that, right? Because surely, on some level, isn't it correct? Doesn't it make any sense that if a slave was indeed a valuable asset, which they certainly were in the antebellum South, wouldn't one wish to preserve that asset? Why would you throw your own money away? You want to treat it well. You want to maintain its value for as long a time as possible. You're not going to crash your own car, are you, right? Why would you render your own labor unfit to perform that labor? It's just financial sense, isn't it? Now, sure, some owners, we always get the admission, some owners would have had a bad temper. Some of them would have been abusive. I mean, some people do. They smash their keyboards when they lose a game. Some people will throw their hammer aside if they miss the nail, or slam a door when they're angry. Insurance fraud exists, so that's a whole other conversation that we could have about the insurance implications of slavery. Actually, a really interesting topic, but things like that exist. But for the most part, that doesn't really happen. I mean, not to such a degree that it really causes severe enough damage to impact the tool's ability to operate, usually. You know, if I, hit the wheel of my car because someone cut me off in a frustration, then that's not really the same as me actually, like, scratching my own car with a key or hitting it into a wall, anything like that. You know what I mean? But a slave, it's not an object. Not really. Like, maybe it was considered legally, but let's be honest, not really. No, they're not. They have these pesky things called emotions. They have these desires and a survival instinct. And these things can really get in the way of forced labor, can't they? You may ask, a master. Why would you abuse your own slave? They're your own property. To which the master would laugh, I think, at such it's quaint, isn't it? The innocence of it all. Well, I wish I didn't have to beat them, the owner may reply. I wish I didn't have to hire all these overseers, take time out of the working day to issue punishments. And you're right, it's a real shame. Gotta damage my own property. But, at the end of the day, it's just a necessary part of doing business. The same as feeding them, housing them, and all the rest. These are expenses I wish I didn't have, but you gotta do what you gotta do. If an owner might beat, whip, hobble just one slave, and that fear is sufficient to keep all the others docile and in line, working hard because they fear the repercussions, well then from a financial point of view, why wouldn't you? It's a small maintenance to keep the operation running smoothly, and even then, a whipping session or any other form of beating or abuse. I mean, yeah, it'll take them out of commission for a day or two, but what do you care? They'll be right back out there in the field soon enough, and ultimately you might have converted that, pesky pesky desire for freedom or whatever, you may have converted it into an overwhelming desire for safety, security, and you may have made a docile worker. There you go, keeping all the others in line, and you're fixing the problem in the one. It's like percussive maintenance, right? That's a thing. That's a term that people use. As it was, this was a world in which violence was common. How do you maintain discipline in a classroom? Well, you beat the kids. If a wife disobeys her husband, well, domestic violence was an awful lot more common thing than it is today. Quite possibly the worst thing that a military can do, for example, to their own soldiers and sailors, is to render them unfit for service, to beat them, hang them, shoot them, and yet in order to maintain discipline, prevent the entire force from mutinying, sometimes you have to have a flogging. Why would we ever expect chattel slaves, barely even regarded as human, legally or culturally, to receive different and better treatment than any other element of society? But that too is a dangerous line of thought, because it would seem to imply that the slaves, well, yeah, I mean, it's bad conditions, but everyone had it bad. They didn't have it particularly bad when compared with other elements of society. But they did. As the lowest stratum of society, both legally and culturally, they were not only the easiest to punish, but by far they were the most commonly punished, and along much more extreme lines. After all, they were typically worked the hardest, they received the least in exchange, and there was always the fear of runaways, or even worse, a slave revolt, the wolf held by its ears, and all that. This is to say nothing of how many racial ideas of the time, which cannot be discounted, basically stated, like scientifically, this is like a popular conception. Obviously it's not true, but heck, the idea even exists still today in some circles, let's be honest about it. There was this idea that black Africans were less intelligent and more prone to violent behavior themselves, and thus violence was a more valid fashion of getting the idea across with them than it would have been with other races. For example, a white slave, maybe you can talk to, but the blacks, you can't do that. These were the popular ideas of the time. I don't need to harp on about how the average punishment for a slave was much worse than for an industrial worker or any other element of society, because that's pretty common knowledge. Instead, let's address the real elephant in the room, because thus far I've only discussed that which is still following a line of financial reasoning, a Machiavellian equation of how much punishment is required to maintain production. It's still assigning a form of logic that's very, very clean, if also gross. This assumes, however, that there is some truth to the argument in question. It's saying, right, the idea of approaching it from this financial point of view makes sense, it just disagrees on what the methodology is for what's more financially viable, being love or fear. But like I said, this isn't just a bad argument, it's not just incorrect, it's a stupid argument. So let's move on from the reasonable, the financial, the logical, and on to the reality of what happens on the ground. 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 The reality of what By way of comparison, a soldier, much like a slave, is unable to leave their position, and if they try, they're subject to severe punishment: beatings, whippings, shooting. They both, the soldier and the slave, lead lives of physical hardship, extreme privation. But that is where the likeness ends, because a soldier still retains certain rights and privileges under the law. He is paid for his services. He had the possibility of a pension afterwards. He generally, depends on the system, depends on the time, but he generally enters into this state willingly, unlike a slave, and once discharged, shall be his own man again. His wife, his children, they're his own. And his officers, those above him, are limited by things like the Articles of War in how they can treat him. And should he be abused within any particular authority, he has recourse through his regiment, through the army on a wider scale, and even through civil authorities. A slave, however, was viewed as property to be used and dispensed with as considered proper by their owner. Should the master have a temper, there are no legal protections against it. Why would one damage their own slave, which is their own valuable property? We might also ask, why would someone beat their own dog? Or more disturbingly, perhaps a better comparison, disturbingly enough, why would a pimp ever beat their own prostitute? That's just unrealistic, wouldn't it be? Control. It can have financial value, sure, but sometimes it isn't so reasonable as that. Sometimes it's not about the money, it's about the feeling of power. Or it could be anger. Maybe the owner is angered at the victim. Maybe it's just general anger and they're looking to get it out somehow. You ever see how people treat customer service representatives? Just because their lives are miserable at home, the wife hasn't looked at them the same way in 18 years, and so they decide to get their anger out on the customer service rep because they're miserable, something like that. They're just looking for someone, anyone they have even a modicum of power over to abuse for the hell of it. It might be inordinate lust, perhaps. Or perhaps it's a fear of abandonment. The slaves will leave me. I have to keep them tied to me in some way. A schizophrenic paranoia. Maybe they're plotting against me. Maybe they just think it's a lot of fun because they can. Literally any reason imaginable. If the concept exists, it probably happened. The nature of a slave population is a one under complete and total control, and very rarely, if ever, do they have any means, be it legal, social, or otherwise, to seek redressment. And ultimately, that is one of the greatest factors at play here. That even if 99% of slaveholders were outright kind towards their property, be it for personal or financial reasons, well then ultimately that 1% is still going to exist, and they're going to be permitted under a legal system by which victims are, again, treated as property. And no amount of arguing about what makes financial sense, or how some slave owners treated, even most, treated their slaves more kindly, can possibly change that the structure of a slave society itself permits, and in many instances even actively encourages, abuse. It isn't a matter of, there's a few bad apples among the owners. It isn't a matter of corruption or a broken system. The abuse itself is codified by law. And in that way, even if the majority of slave owners were totally cool with their slaves, well, ultimately that doesn't matter. The institution itself, by its own nature, if it's functioning as intended, that's the problem. That's where the ultimate evil lies. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about the so-called good slaveholders. Let's talk about the kindly individuals and everything who treated people like family. The examples that we get bombarded with of the small family farm with just one or two slaves who are quote-unquote treated like members of the family. They're just members of the family whom, if push came to shove and the family's about to lose the farm, well, they could be legally sold off to pay any debts. Members of the family who, Oh, yeah, I mean, technically, ultimately, didn't have a choice but to stay and remain members of the family, lest they be chased down by slave catchers, forcibly returned. Members of the family who, if they, did some work in the local town or something, well, they don't actually have a legal right to any of their wages that they earned. If they do get anything, it's purely by the whim of their owners. A man, for example, may love his dog. He may treat his dog very well. He even refers to it as, oh, it's a member of the family. We're all part of the dog's pack, very sweet. But we all know, we all understand the difference between a child, a parent, a spouse, and the family dog. And then, of course, there's a real kicker. The thing that, so many people seem to forget when discussing, for example, certain founding fathers in particular, which is that a slave, as an object of property, is quite literally incapable of consent in really any regard. Not just sexual, but in literally anything that happens to the slave, there is zero consent. It just happens to be that sexually is the most visceral, I think, example for obvious reasons. Now, to be fair, whether sometimes the slave might think that they're consenting, but whether they themselves believe they are able to consent, whether they're amenable to something, ultimately that is completely irrelevant because they are in a state of absolute bondage with no autonomy over their own person. When it comes to, again, sexual relations, even the most willing of slaves, although I'd be willing to bet that not many of them, if any, really were, is by every definition, save, of course, that of the warped slave society itself, a victim of rape. And the owner is always definitively a rapist. They are no more able to consent to a sexual relationship with their owner or really any member of the owning class than a child is with their teacher. Maybe the kid is really enthusiastic at first, like, oh boy, I'm going to be so popular now. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people talk about that sort of thing in the news. It's still warped ideas about how we treat childhood rape victims in a lot of ways. That's a whole other rant, staying on topic here. Doesn't matter if the kid thinks that they're all for it, it's going to mess with them in certain ways. There are reasons why we consider it that they are not able to consent. A slave is even less so. Because at the end of the day, if the slave shares the story, the law wouldn't even bat an eye. There is no good state of slavery. There are merely degrees of evil for it. Now, also don't get me wrong, it is important, very important, to understand those degrees, to study the social dynamic between the slaver and the enslaved in a variety of different environments. It's important to differentiate between the large plantations and the small family farms, and the differences between those owners who lived with their slaves more or less cordially, like alongside as family and everything, even if it is warped. It's important to understand how that's different from the larger scale where the slaves are mere furniture, tools to be used, and everything. That's a very important distinction to make. Just as it is important to understand the philosophy of those who were in favor of slavery and how they justify the institution, be it for reasons of religion, which is very common, be it for purely economic reasons, even reasons of social welfare, saying, oh yeah, they have it better here than they did in another. People still do that sort of thing today. It's all very important to understand how those arguments work. But at the end of the day, those explanations, which are so important, must never seep into the realm of justification, for there lies the true rot of civilized society. Now, thank you all so very much for watching, and I hope that this video might help to provide some of you with a new approach to how you think about the question of slavery and how individuals argue about its role in really any society. But nowadays, at least from my background living in the States, particularly in that of the American antebellum South. So before, again, all the whataboutism of different situations like, well, slavery existed in other places, yeah, it did. All of this applies to any situation in which slavery was a legal state, across the board. It's just that, like, oh, shocker, the American in America, surrounded by other Americans, and the comment section was all about American slavery. Like, yeah, I'm going to talk about the American situation. That's just how it works. I know all of this may lead you to think otherwise, but I am an American. Hoping to move over there soon, but that's... Anyways, this video, nor any of my work, would not be possible without the steadfast support of my patrons, whose names you see before you now. And if you're interested in my work, if you'd like to see it continue, even despite the controversy of subjects like this, well, then you might consider joining their number for as little as $1 a month, which will also grant you a few little benefits besides. Or alternatively, another great way to support me is you can view the content early by watching it over on Recast.tv, which is a great YouTube alternative with less ads, no sponsored messaging, and you can still find it, and you can watch it there free of charge just by watching one ad before the video. And you can find a link for that as well in the description below. Until the next time, my dear viewer, I am and I shall remain, I hope, your most humble and obedient of servants.